And with that, I think we are now recording, and I want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is February the 26th and time for another monthly. Actually, this is a semi-monthly call, and today's topic is building trust and connection in the virtual space. I want to welcome those of you that are with me. Hope that you're going to enjoy our half an hour together, which is really geared to give you some ideas, some tools, some practices that you can incorporate into your virtual events. So you may be doing virtual coaching, you may be doing conference calls, you might be doing webinars. Really, we're going to be looking at some of the very practical and tactical things you can be doing to build trust and connection, which of course is the foundation of any important conversation, especially in a virtual space. So if you haven't met me before, my name's Jennifer Britton. I'm the author of several books, including Effective Virtual Conversations, and I do these calls once a month. Although, as I said, today is our February and March call. I'm going to be traveling next month, and just to keep things simple, I am just doing this for our February-March event. I started these calls back in July of 2017 as my newest book, Effective Virtual Conversations, came out. And so if you have not been with me on one of these calls before, just a quick reminder that you can actually catch up, almost like do some binge watching of Effective Virtual Conversations over at our YouTube channel. So it is under Effective Group Coach at YouTube or at effectivevirtualconversations.com. So now that we're oriented, I'd like to just kick us off. And again, it's all about how do we build trust and connection in the virtual space? Because if we don't have that connection or that trust amongst not only ourselves and the group, but amongst the group, it's unlikely that people are going to engage. So I'd like you to think about opportunities you have coming up. Maybe it's groups that you're doing virtually or even in person, because these are skills that we want to cultivate to make sure that people are with us in an engaged conversation. So I'll just, if you're interested in participating, just want to gauge your level of interest in participating today. But we've got Carol, and it's Byrna. Is it Byrna? Bryna. Thank you, Bryna. Bryna, I know you've been with us for a few of these calls. Like, when you think of building trust and connection in your work, Bryna, what's going to help invite people into the conversation, do you think?
So first of all, I think if I'm offering a webinar or a group coaching opportunity, it would have to be based on what I know are the issues that the prospective clients or participants are dealing with.
Yeah.
So how do I get that information? And I'm asking myself this question because I'm about to do that. I would think it would be a questionnaire or being out there talking to people, what's on your mind? What would you be interested in attending if in fact I offered it?
Yeah. So those are such important questions to be asking, right? Because we want to, number one, know who we have in our room. And especially in the virtual space, and I've said this in a couple of other calls, doing more of the pre-relationship building, the pre-assessment, leads to a more engaging call. So for us, we're coming together in this initial combination, but where it's feasible, I will either, one, hold a pre-call with everyone on the platform we're using, because we don't want to assume that the platform we're using everyone is comfortable with. And I have a group going on right now. As great as Zoom always is, there are parts of the world that people can't access it from their location. So we do want to make sure that we're, one, sort of finding the best of all worlds. And that may mean let's jump on to a quick 10 to 15 minute call so that I can learn more about you, find out what's brought you here, and also get you familiar with the technology. Because one of the big sort of shockers, I think, too, is for people who aren't used to seeing themselves on camera, it can be very confronting. And think about, I think about my own experience, a few years ago, really getting used to this technology. Now it's just in the background, but that also helps to either boost or erode people's confidence level. So we want to set everyone up for success, which was, of course, the topic of one of our past calls. So Carol, I think this is one of the first times we've had you here at Effective Virtual Conversations. Welcome to you. And
Thank you.
When you think about your work, what is something you want to be doing to build trust and connection in the virtual spaces you're going to be hosting?
Well, what I actually I haven't jumped into the virtual realm yet. I think you know that I'm going to try the one-to-one first of all. But I loved Bryna's response in terms of really finding out what it is that the clientele really would like to be involved in, what answers some of their needs. I love that. But once having gathered the group or had people register, I think the pre-calls are really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly they, when in the first meeting, having everyone involved in designing how they plan to work together. What's it going to look like?
Yeah.
What's it going to sound like? What's it going to feel like to be and talking about. It's really important that they understand confidentiality and all that sort of thing. So.
Lots of little things, right? Like it's a growing list.
Yeah, right.
And even like what I did, so those that are listening to this as a recording, before I started the recording, I asked both Carol and Bryna, I'm sorry, Bryna, is it okay to record you? Because people will want to know if they're seeing a recording going in the background, like how is this going to be shared? Is that okay? And depending on your business location, you will maybe even sometimes need to get a release form signed. So there's lots of different layers, but building trust and connection, making sure that we're, creating manageable experiences not only for ourselves, but others is also a key part of this work. So I have a little cartoon here. And in fact, this is a cartoon from my Teams 365 blog, which is a blog for leaders. And for many, many years, I've been doing workshops, webinars now, retreat programs on, the skills of influence and also the skills of building trust and connection. And a few years ago, I had this cartoon designed, Stephen Rothfeller. He's done quite a few for me. And I said, okay, we want to really just look at the duality of trust. So you'll notice that this gentleman here has two complete different sides. You have the trust builder, things like I'm going to walk my talk, I'm going to have regular open communication, going to recognize that, that it's a real conversation, I'm going to follow through, I'm going to demonstrate trust, and I'm going to set clear expectations. These are all things that we can be doing whether we're leading a team or leading a webinar or hosting a virtual group. These things can get as eroded just as quickly by some of the trust destroyers. So notice you almost have like the used car salesman on the other side, and we can quickly erode trust, especially in virtual groups when there's no follow through, there's little or no feedback. If I had just kept talking and going to this slide rather than bringing both of you into the room, whether or not trust would be eroded, connection would be eroded, right? People don't like being talked at in today's world. Children, adults, youth, we want to be engaged in a conversation. So in building trust and building connection, make sure you're quickly connecting people to the topic. And I did that by asking you today, what are some things that you might do to build trust and connection in your groups? Asking a question along those lines, or maybe showing a video, something that's going to engage people and bring them in the room, create some common ground. These are the things that we want to be doing early on. Now, another trust destroyer, much more possible if you have a large group, like 10, 15 people, to have a favorite, be calling on the same person all the time. In the virtual space, especially, we want to invite people into the conversation. We want to use different skills and strategies to have their voice in the room. So because we're a small group today, can do everything verbally. People who are interested, you'll see other effective virtual conversation monthly calls. We've used annotation. we've used chat functions, we've used breakouts. Those are all other ways to invite people to engage. And just be noting when you're kicking off your groups, you'll be wanting to let them know that there will be different ways that you'll be inviting them to participate. Technologies like Zoom, much better than some others. I'm doing a series of programs on another platform right now. I will not name what that other platform is, but we can't even have the group chat with each other. They cannot see each other's chats. And as a virtual facilitator, it is so much more work for me to make sure that the voices are being heard. And I need to go that extra mile because otherwise people will disengage. So again, we have to work within the frame or the constraints that we have, but just be noticing how you can really, like, there's a lot of power differentials in this work. How are you creating favorites? Are you calling on everyone? Are you letting everyone know that they will be called on? These are things that can either erode or build trust. And likewise, I'll just read through the others: lack of transparency, gossip, and doesn't listen. So in your work, I just really wanted to kick us off by saying, okay, we can build trust, we can destroy trust. In Effective Virtual Conversations in Chapter 2, I talk about what I call the triad of virtual learning. And it is a triad. They are interconnected. We can build trust, which accelerates safety and boosts connection. So in the next couple of minutes, I want to get very practical and tactical, as I always do, to talk about what are some of the activities and things we can do to boost trust, connection, or safety. So when I'm doing this in person, I get groups to actually break out and share with each other. Carol, Birna, listeners, I'm going to just get you to track 4 ideas under each window. And we'll look at trust first, then connection, then safety, and have a bit of discussion after each. So I said we start with trust. We're going to start with connection first. So I think not everyone, but many people are now familiar with some of the breakout capabilities that different virtual platforms allow us to use. If you've never experienced them, certainly I hope you'll join me for an upcoming program because they're really, really fun and they allow people to connect together more often. Now, techniques that I'll use regularly to build connection, and it's not just the connection I have, but imagine if Birna, Carol, we're both in a group, I might be putting them out to a breakout for 5 minutes of this call. And I'd give you a question to have some discussion around. You'd have that dialogue. And chances are when you came back, if the pairing was good and the skills were good, you'd come back with a big smile on your face. One of the best levers or leverage points for engagement is to put people into breakout. And this is a functionality that platforms like Zoom, you can activate. It's not normally activated in your regular account, but you can activate it and then move people in and out of breakouts. And I think what it allows is for people to have the space to connect and be themselves without me or the leader in the room. So think about how you might use breakouts. We've already talked about pre-calls. I think pre-calls are essential in building connection. For the participant who's joining you, it gives a little window into the world of what they can expect. And today we have all levels of comfort. Some people love virtual because they can just drop in and there's no nerves involved. For others, though, they may be very concerned about, can I access the technology? What will I look like? Will it work? Will this be worth my time? So pre-calls help to at least create a connection with you as the call leader. 3 others, and I said make a list of it each, at least 4, but I can't over plug. I guess that's the word I want to say today. I can't say enough about how video streaming changes the conversation. I think for those of us that are used to it, when you now step into a call that doesn't have video streaming, it's like, oh, I missed the connection. And it's very easy to go into that, like, oh, I'm going to multitask. I'll have the internet on and I'll be doing something else. That just erodes connection terribly. Now, video streaming.
Jennifer, may I jump in for a sec?
Yeah, go ahead. Jump in.
Well, say more about video streaming.
Mm-hmm.
To me, this is what it means to me. I'll should throw my vulnerability out there.
Thank you.
But by video streaming, in other words, you may introduce a video as part of a discussion sparker. Is that likely?
So that's one of two meanings, absolutely. And what I'm meaning by video streaming is even what we're doing here today, where we can see each other. We can visually see each other and have our video streaming so that we are on. And it sounds like a little thing, but actually it's a really big trust builder and connector. Okay. When you move in and out of arenas where you can't see everyone, one of the tools I usually share with my groups is to get them to draw. If we can't see each other, I get them to draw a virtual table. And I'll just grab a pad of paper that I have here. If you can imagine, I get them to actually draw a table. It could be a rectangle, a circle, a square. But as people like check in and say, hi, I'm Jennifer, I'll get them to put me in a chair. And next you would be in a chair and Birna would be in a chair. It starts giving us a visual map. Because if we can't connect ourselves, if we don't even know what the range is or the horizon, it makes it very, very challenging. So when we can see each other, that starts to boost something. It's like, okay, I can see Carol. I sort of know a little bit more about her. I can see what's behind her. I can see what she looks like. These are things that start building connection. And that's what we want to do in a virtual space, because there are probably groups that you'll be facilitating where the only connection could be literally we have an interest in the issue. I have many groups, 8 people, 8 nationalities, 8 times of day, 8 organizations that we're a part of. But what's bringing us together is our interest and our passion around a topic. And you can see that on people's faces. So wherever possible, we want to build and boost and help people find that common connection. Another way that we can do that too is through peer partner work. And this is, again, this is like an add-on. It's not an essential, I would say, but there may be programs that you're running that are meeting infrequently, and they could benefit from having an additional touch point, not with the whole group, but maybe by peer partners. And why I have spent so much time on video streaming is because I had a group last year that I was going to be away for a call. So I said, why don't you guys meet as partners? Because I'm going to be away for a week. Let's make sure you have your email addresses and you know where you can connect. Everyone was like, sure, we'll do that. We hadn't seen each other before that breakout, like the weekly peer partner. And I came back 2 weeks later and I said, how did the conversations go? And there was dead silence. And I said, did anyone meet? And they were like, no, we know we were supposed to, but we didn't meet. And it was the first week that we could see everyone on video. And I could see just through their facial expression. I was like, okay, so I was curious, tell me a little bit more about what you need to make this happen, because I'm away again next week. And it really turned out that once we had seen each other, that upped the ante. People all of a sudden did email the other person they were supposed to. So whether it was just because it was round 2 or because they could see each other, I really think part of it is that they could see each other and they felt more comfortable reaching out to, Jane Doe or John Smith because they now had a visual. I think we underestimate a lot of the visual. And so in building connection, trust, and also engagement, think about how people can be seen in more ways than one. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left of our call. There's a few ideas for building connection. Building trust, I've just gone through the 2 cartoons or the duality. I've mentioned most of these, and actually Carol, if you just quickly slide through the list, Carol mentioned the 3rd from the bottom, confidentiality. How do we ensure that there's a confidential or safe space for people to connect? And one of the things I've been writing about, talking about for more than a decade now, is the importance of creating ways of working or ground rules, group agreements, or team agreements in groupings that you're working with. Have the group co-design with you what does a safe space to connect look like and sound like. And chances are it will involve confidentiality, which means what is said on a line stays on the line. Now, the challenge with that, let's go back to this issue of, are you sharing recordings? One of the reasons why we're not enacting confidentiality here is because we are, you came onto the call and you knew that I would be sharing this recording. In 100% of my group and team coaching work that I do not share recordings outside of the group. I always get requests for, oh, Jen, can you share a recording on blah with the group? I'd love to, and I haven't had that approval from the group, or I haven't had the pre-approval to say, yes, I could. So we do want to make sure that we are building trust through our actions. Again, trust can be eroded as much as it is built. I think another one that's a little, different than the earlier cartoon I showed is just to be very clear on process. Okay, we'll be meeting for half an hour, or we're going to be meeting for an hour. In a call like this, I really want to stick to time for a couple of reasons. There's only a few of you on the call. It's a little harder to drop off subtly than if it was a bigger group. So I want to clarify process each and every time. Are you going to be inviting people to share their ideas? Are they able to pass if they don't want to speak? These are process pieces or process pieces we want to really clarify as we go. And again, they help to build trust, or sometimes if we're winging it because we're a little confident, overconfident, we can be eroding trust if all of a sudden we throw something out and we haven't gotten agreement around that with a group. So any questions or comments? Are there some of these perhaps that you see better modeled than others, or ones that you're still curious about? How would I do that? Just going to give you a minute to read through the list. Some of them are pretty straightforward, but things like build on strengths. It's not always apparent in a new group what the strengths are. Luckily, if you're a coach, this is where you might actually build in an early module on strengths. What are your strengths? Mm-hmm. Or you can ask the group, what can we rely on you for? What are you bringing to us as a group? If you've read any of my earlier books, Effective Group Coaching or From One to Many, Best Practices for Team and Group Coaching, you would notice that I love talking about an activity I call personal logos. And I still use this activity. I get people to draw a logo which represents what they're bringing to the group. And that can point to strengths, it can point to styles. You get a pretty good indication as well in terms of what people like to do and don't like to do. So I'm like a very, drawn art is not my fine point. Let me reframe it like that. I'm a writer. I'm not a drawer. And, I often model to groups where people are a little like protective of their artistic abilities. I'll lead off and I'll say, here's my drawing of what I'm bringing to the group today, so that it puts people at a bit more of an ease. So that was my little song and dance to give you enough time to read the screen. Any questions or comments on what you see here?
So for me, it would be clarifying the process and letting people know what to expect. I think that is so critical. Mm-hmm. If people don't have a sense and a roadmap, they feel lost.
Yes. Yeah. And, I love that I use the analogy of the roadmap all the time. It's actually built into many of my programs. You've probably seen my roadmap at some of the end of these calls. And what's important in the virtual space is you may want to map that out at the start. You can't really leave it visual unless you have it in an upper or lower corner. That's another slide design issue. But you'll want to remind people mid-call as well. You probably heard me say a few minutes ago, okay, our call's ending in 10 minutes. That starts to also shape mindset as well. And that's really quite important in today's context as well. Let people know what they can expect. So that's Bjorna. How about you, Carol? Is there anything here you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, quite frankly, I think you have to hold on to all of them, as daunting as that may sound. But once you get working with the group and, this is just good leadership.
Yeah. Exactly. It's good leadership. as is, making sure that we are avoiding the trust destroyers, not setting people up for success. It takes time, but let people know what they can expect. Send out information well in advance. Don't assume everyone is going to be online right up to the time that you're asking them to call in. So I will be sharing these because, again, this is like a lot of data and a lot of information. If you have effective virtual conversation, this is found actually on page 54. But we've really talked through most of these, except for one that I also want to draw attention to, buried in the middle of trust destroyers. It's the fifth one down, assuming that silence means everything is okay.
Oh, right, yeah. No.
And I think, silence is such an important ally in our work as coaches, as facilitators. Silence, we may be creating the only silence in people's world. So don't forget to leave like literally silent pauses where people can write things down. Today is not a very good example of that because I'm trying to fit in a lot of content. But we also want to be proactive in asking for feedback or asking for input, or even doing what I've been doing today, checking in with you. What are your questions? What are you thinking about? That provides another voice. It provides another perspective. And as soon as you're working with groups or teams, there's multiple perspectives at play. So check your own assumptions, check in with the group regularly, take the pulse. On some platforms, I use emojis. There's actually little emojis that people can use to say, I'm loving this, or I'm not really loving this. And whether or not people are being truthful, because some people will say, oh, well, they'll just give you a smiley face. Yes, and if I haven't asked, I don't even know what they're going to choose, right? As a coach, I'm really in belief that, people will let me know if they need to let me know, because this isn't just my call. This is everyone's call. So be aware of how your trust builders and destroyers are showing up. You can do a screen grab, and maybe this is a good opportunity. Does anyone know how to do a screen grab?
Surely you just
so not to cut you off right now, but it would entail an escape, a hit on the escape button, which would pull you out of your main screen. And then most Windows devices have a snagging feature or a Windows snip. I won't get you to do it right now, but there is a way, and maybe that's a future call on how to do things like screen grabs, because there are times when you just want to like send this out. What I'll indicate is you want to check minute 25 on the video when you look at the recording, and then you can make sure you've written these things down. So we've got 5 minutes left. We had Carol mention earlier the importance of doing ways of working. This is actually an example of a group ground rules. The group came up with start and end on time, hear from everyone, don't get stuck, keep moving, confidentiality, respect, and support each other's learning, of course, in a different order. But we want to make that visual. And one of the reasons why I continue to like using Zoom is rather than having it pre-populated, I would get us to identify the ways of working, and in many instances, if we can, we'll annotate it on the screen so the group can see it. And again, we use that screen sharing or screen snap photo where we can actually take a photo of that and share it with the group. Every time you meet, you will want to return back and maybe as a primary slide, have the ways of working, or remind people to print that off and have it by their phone or their actual place. So little tip there. Streaming, we talked about that earlier. And again, I wanted to just point to a couple of other things. In the in-person world, we're always using Post-it notes. In the virtual world, we want to make sure that we're ensuring all voices are heard and represented. Today, I haven't been using breakouts or chat or annotation, but we'd want to use that. And I think we also now are increasingly having situations where we have blended groups. So this group here is not just the 3 people in the room with me. We actually have, I think, 2 or 3 people here on the laptop. And this is quite typical of my work. I have people with me maybe in downtown Toronto or in other parts of the world. We're working real time on pieces of paper. What you can't see behind them is we also have people with us virtually. And so they're doing the same activities, we're doing, but they're joining us virtually. Same practices, same principles, but it does take more time to ensure that those who are joining virtually are getting what the the people in the room are also getting. And of course, you have to look at logistics like voice, clarity, all these things. But just wanted to put that out. I think for many people who have been following these calls, they're like, so what else? Like, what are the intermediate levels? I would say intermediate and advanced facilitation in the virtual world is, how do you manage a group that is in person and blended?
Wow.
One final concept I want to leave you with, because I do want to respect time, is the whole notion of safety. And I've been amazed in the last year of all the presentations I've done in person and virtually, I inevitably get a question around psychological safety. I think this is a real issue for people in all rooms, all contexts today. I always like to point people back to the work of Amy Edmonston. She's out of Harvard. Her body of work really started with psychological safety and more recently has grown into the realm of teaming, teams that rapidly form and disband. What Edmonston says is, is the environment safe for interpersonal risk-taking? Until I feel safe, until I feel like I can bring my voice to the table, I may not be fully engaging. And so as a virtual facilitator, we want to look at using all of these techniques to make sure that people feel that they can bring their questions, bring their comments and conversations respectfully and riskily to the table. I know riskily is not a word, but there's some edgy work here in terms of, am I safe to say something that is in contradiction to what Jennifer is saying? Am I safe to have a perspective that is different than everyone else in the room? And that's something we want to model, especially in a global context like we operate within. I sit north of Toronto. Others are not going to be sitting and living in the same context I am. The choice of language I use, all of these things either build or erode safety. So one last little thing to keep in mind. And again, on page 56, you'll see some other suggestions. The roadmap idea, the ways of working, providing an opportunity for all group members to voice concerns, connecting with others in a deeper way, like breakouts, connecting with the facilitator or leader of the call in pre-calls, using language and word choice that's appropriate, and of course, providing materials which support the learner. So we've covered a big terrain, 3 main areas: safety, trust, and connection. I think you know where I'm going to go next, which is to the roadmap. What are your next steps? What is one step? Because we got to wrap up our call, but what is one thing that you're going to put into practice or you want to remember to put into practice in your own work? So Bjorna, what's one thing you want to do as a result of our call today?
So I'm putting together a group coaching program. And I'm in the process of interviewing people to find out what would be a hot topic for them. And I'm finding out, funny that you mentioned this, that it's all about trust and connection. And so those are 2 modules that I'm going to have: building trust, building relationships through connection.
Nice.
So that's what I'm about to do.
Well, that's good. And I think you'll have a lot of takers. I think these are really some of the key words of 2018. They've been around forever, but I think right now in this moment, a lot of people are hungry to explore this and cultivate more of it in their life as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bjorna. And Carol, how about you?
Well, there's so many things here but what really strikes me initially, and it's a marketing strategy, I guess, is that developing that questionnaire to put out to the large group. I love what Brenna said initially, what would you be interested if I were offering this? I guess my question is to both of you, any suggestions of where to get templates or samples of good questionnaire questions?
Great question. I would say an immediate two resources that come to mind. One is you can use a platform like SurveyMonkey to create it once you have your questions.
Okay.
But I think a couple of places, just Google the term needs assessment. That will bring up a number of ideas like training needs assessment. Carol, module 2 in Group Coaching Essentials will be a resource guide. Go to the evaluation questions. There actually may be some questions there. And also check out the Group Coaching Ins and Outs blog that I've hosted for many years. So it's groupcoaching.blogspot.com. groupcoaching.blogspot.com.
Are we getting a recording of this, Jennifer?
You can. I can send out the link, and it's always posted over at effectivevirtualconversations.com. So I'll send you a link because I have your email address, Carol and Birna. If you would like me to send it, you can email me, and I'll send you a copy of this recording as well. But they're posted on Effective Virtual Conversations and the community call page. Well, we are at the end, and we have looked at a bunch of things. Again, there is no call in the month of March, so the next scheduled call is mid-April, Monday, April 16th. The topic is 3 exercises for more engaging conversations. Hope that you can join me Monday 11, and that's April 16th.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you. Have a great day, and I will be happy to send this out. All right.
Nice to meet you, Brenna.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you later, Jennifer.
See you later. Bye.